But the world is also watching what's happening in Davos, where world leaders gather to discuss the top issues around the globe. President Trump was there and announced that the U.S. will join the 1 Trillion Trees initiative launched at the World Economic Forum in an effort to combat climate change.
We will continue to show strong leadership in restoring, growing, and better managing our trees and our forests. This is not a time for pessimism. This is a time for optimism. Fear and doubt is not a good thought process, because this is a time for tremendous hope and joy and optimism and action. But to embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, we must reject the perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse.
Brian Sozzi, Yahoo Finance's editor-at-large and co-host of The First Trade, is in Davos. Your thoughts on the comments from President Trump?
Adam, good to hear you. Yes, so that line, which I would compare it to throwing a piece of red meat into a lion's den, got some of the biggest applause out of President Trump's overall 30-minute speech at the event. Now, what's unclear is what the U.S. will specifically be doing to help this $1.2 trillion initiative, which is designed to reduce, the World Economic Forum came out with this a year or so ago, to reduce carbon emissions or to neutralize them. What is unclear is on what the U.S. will do to drive that initiative. What do consumers do? Go out to Home Depot and buy a tree and plant it in their yard and they get a rebate? Unclear. I'm sure more details to come on that front.
That seems a little thin in terms of action if people are just going to be planting trees on their own in their yards, Brian. I don't know. But certainly perhaps my skepticism is not alone. Environmental activist Greta Thunberg was there as well. She took to the stage, and she was perhaps who the president was giving a bit of a backhanded, unnamed swipe at when he talked about the prophets of doom, because she was much less sanguine about the actions that the U.S. and others have been taking.
Yeah, Julie, Greta Thunberg was definitely in the zone this morning. I was able to tweet a photo of her. She gave 2 speeches today, and she essentially stuck to her message, what we've heard from her in the past. Basically, people need to step up their game on the sustainability front.
The climate and environment is a hotter topic right now, and a lot thanks to young people pushing. But of course, if you see it from another perspective, pretty much nothing has been done since the global emissions of CO2 has not reduced. And that is, of course, what we are trying to achieve, among other things. It will require much more than this. This is just the very beginning.
Yep. So there you have Greta Thunberg certainly coming out in full effect. But I can tell you, Adam and Julie, in a lot of these panels, and sustainability is not just something that a lot of executives are saying for the sake of saying it out in a public forum. I think a lot of these executives are starting to really think about how they could do better jobs on this across the board. And I caught up to PayPal's CEO, Dan Schulman. He has been a proponent of really focusing on sustainability efforts, and he's done a good job. And a lot of other executives I talked to are certainly trying to step up their game.
Yeah, the ship seems to finally be turning a little bit. Thank you so much, Brian. Look forward to continued coverage there. Davos is always so interesting for the disconnects, right? Yeah. You have the disconnect between all of these CEOs talking about what they're doing on climate, and legitimately many of them have started to do things, but then Greta saying you're not doing enough. You have the perennial disconnect between all of these rich folks, powerful people gathered there, and the sort of rest of the world. I mean, what do you make of it?
I am a cynic when it comes to Davos, admittedly, as somebody who has attended. And I just think, you know, we have to understand why it's a good thing that companies are finally talking about it. And I don't think we should dismiss that. But there's a reason behind it, right? It's because the governments haven't taken action.
Well, and it's because their customers are pushing them to as well. It's
exactly.
Not because they're
and so
just doing
action now is better than nothing.
Yeah.
But to your point, to have this conversation in the mountains of Switzerland.
Right, when you've flown in on private jets.
When you flow in on private jets, to me, seems to be a bit disconnected from what's actually happening on the ground.
If there is a crisis, which most people say there is, her generation is saying, hey, you've got to do more. And what she said specifically was not plant trees, You've got to divest today, divest from all fossil fuel. That just isn't going to happen.
Yeah, there's a gap between both sides here, and I think, we can debate whether it's a crisis or not. It's clearly a problem that we need to deal with. And to me, planting, so this campaign is 1 trillion trees, planting 1 trillion trees or saving 1 trillion trees by the year 2050. This seems, for Trump to say this, just sounds like a total cop-out, because what is Trump's climate policy? Drill more coal, get more coal, U.S. coal burned elsewhere in the world, and ship U.S. carbon energy overseas. That is Trump's climate. That is his whole climate plan.
But the market is responding to that plan, and that, coal and mining jobs have fallen, actually. When you look at what's happening there, demand for coal is falling.
Right. Well, so, Trump's climate plan, or his energy plan, doesn't even make economic sense, because the world doesn't want coal, or they don't want more of it anyway. So I think for Trump to say, we're going to join this tree thing, so that, to my mind, that suggests that right after Infrastructure Week in Washington, we're going to have Tree Week. And that's going to be it. Trump. Let's be honest. Trump has no plan for dealing with climate change or global warming. The Republicans in Congress are sort of starting to talk about it, but they're rolling out these ideas that have no meat whatsoever. Meat would be, a carbon tax.
They did that 8 years ago. They tried. Republicans looked at a carbon tax 8 years ago.
I know. Well, it has never happened, and it's a very sensible approach, along with some other things. The Democrats on their side have the Green New Deal, which is this giant grab bag of sort of implausible political things, like the government's going to take over the electrical grid. Could somebody come? That's why CEOs are doing a little something anyway, because nobody else can here in the United States.
Let's talk about